Okay, it's 4 o'clock, May 1st. I call this meeting to order. And first off, I'd like to say a few words on behalf of the co-op. On Tuesday, April 29th at approximately 6 p.m., severe storms impacted the western part of Tri-County, including Knox City, Mundy, Seymour, and Lake Kent. Those powerful storms produced wind gusts up to 106 miles per hour, including at least one large confirmed tornado that caused extensive damage. Significant damage occurred to the regional transmission providers' lines, preventing Tri-County from working on local distribution lines. Over 100 Tri-County poles were broken or blown over, requiring repair or replacement before power can be safely restored. In addition to strong winds, lightning strikes blew many fuses and damaged transformers, including outage numbers. Since Tuesday afternoon, more than 40 employees have been working rotating 16-hour shifts to restore power as safely and quickly as possible. Some of those 40 employees also came from our Tri-County offices to assist. In addition to strong winds and lightning, pre-existing flooding has hindered restoration efforts, preventing access to certain areas for heavy equipment. Thank you to the community for providing food and support for crews and first responders. To best protect the linemen working in dangerous conditions, who must carefully coordinate and communicate in real time. Thank you for not contacting them during storm restoration efforts. We want them to return home safely when power is restored. So we can move on to consent agenda items.
Sorry, I was late. I went down to the other building.
That's okay. Does anybody have any questions or comment on consent agenda items, or do we have a motion to approve them?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, and all those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
And oppose? Okay, so motion carries 3-1. Okay, next agenda item is the 2025 quarterly financial update. I'll turn it over to Scott.
Thank you, Summer. So looking forward to a financial update. We're going to focus on the first quarter of the calendar year. But in doing so, we're going to go back and look at some financial statements, do a little bit of review to show how those things impact the financial statements. And we're also going to try to tie together why. So I hope we have a little bit of discussion as we go through some of this information. I really want to explain why a lot of the actions taken over the past year are starting to have an effect, and they're starting to show up in the financial statements, and you're starting to see the results of those in the budget. So we're excited about that. We'll kind of slowly make our way through this. And we're going to start by going back to July of 2024, where we did an in-depth, deep dive into all three financial statements. We looked at income statement, balance sheet, and statement of cash flows to make sure we understood the impacts that each has on each other and the big picture. So tonight, we're going to briefly review those again. And once that common foundation is established, we'll then look at the first quarter budget on top of that with that context, just to make sure everybody's starting from the same place. Now, for illustration purposes, we are using the most recent audited financial statements. Members watching at home are welcome to find those on our website under the Member Information Center, and you'll have the same information we're working from tonight. So we're going to start with the income statement. The first of the three financial statements that we spent much time on was this one, and as you're aware, non-business people sometimes can get a little bit confusing cash for revenue. The income statement exists to answer a basic question. Where did revenues come from and where did expenses come from over a period of time, correct? So while we know that this does not measure cash, when you look at the bottom line, the phrase, the bottom line, that does not equate to cash, but that is a commonly used phrase and a misnomer. So we'll be careful about that and respect the difference between cash and net income or margins, synonyms, if you will. So if the income statement answers the question, what are revenues and expenses over a period of time, it'd be important to keep in context how that's often used. For publicly traded companies, this is a major emphasis of this is on their tax liability. For nonprofits like cooperatives, lenders use net income statements for a lot of their metrics about our profitability and things like that to pay back loans. So regardless if you're a publicly traded company, a a nonprofit company, whatever it is, there are lots of uses for these three different types of statements. I also want to point out here, as a cooperative, it's also very important to really differentiate the three different types of financial statements, because there have been cooperatives in the past that have tried to pay capital credits off of the net income statement, when we know that that's not cash, and we'll be careful about making strategic decisions off of one of the three financial statements. So with that in mind, we'll move to the balance sheet. If the income statement measures where did revenues and expenses come from and go over a period of time, a balance sheet is at a point in time. It answers a different question. What does an organization own and what do they owe at a point in time, whether it's the last day of the month, last day of the quarter, last day of the fiscal year, or whatever it may be. Publicly traded companies, there's a lot of work done behind the scenes to separate what's true value, worth, market value versus book value, and things like that. For us as a nonprofit, and I'll focus on nonprofit, as a cooperative, our lenders are very interested in the balance sheet to make sure we have enough cash on hand to meet obligations. That's a primary use for us in the balance sheet. As we discussed last year, liquidity is really important, and so maintaining a healthy balance sheet while we maintain the other two financial statements in a good place will be really important for us in the coming years. And then finally, the third financial statement we talked about last year was the statement of cash flows. Equally as important as the other two, and you can't look at one without looking at all three. The balance sheet's answering what's owned and owed at a point in time. The statement of cash flows is over a period of time as well, typically a month, a quarter, fiscal year, something like that. But it answers three questions. Where did cash come from? Where did cash go? And what was the change in cash? Those are three important questions we're going to dive into a little bit deeper as we go through some of this material. All organizations have basically 2 to 3 categories from where cash comes from. Call it operational, their core business. For us, purchasing and distributing electricity, that's the core business. So that's where the cash is largely coming through. And then you have financing activities. It doesn't matter if it's a publicly traded company or a nonprofit. In the financing activities for a publicly traded, they could be issuing stock, bonds, loans, whatever. In our case, obviously, it's receiving or paying back loans. So that can be a source of cash as well. The reason it's important to look at all three financial statements at the same time is it would be tempting to look at this part of the income statement, this part of the statement of cash flows. It could have an immediate effect on the balance sheet. But over time, you'll see it right here. So keeping these two things in balance is something we're going to be very cognizant of in the coming years. Making sure that the company flows on operations, not just debt alone. So we've made a lot of progress on that over the past year. We've talked a lot about that. We don't have to go through all of that again. But the thing that I want to emphasize here is what the team has done to this point to get to the results that you saw a few weeks ago in our annual report of the fiscal year. So our fiscal year ended March 31st. We did send out an annual report, not the audited financials, but an annual report to the membership and key suppliers, partners, things of that nature. We got a lot of good feedback from that. We're very excited about that. But that was for the fiscal year that just ended in March. The budget overview we're about to look at is the first 90 days of this calendar year. Hopefully someday, maybe before I retire, we'll have an opportunity to take the budget year, the calendar year, the fiscal year, maybe employee medical benefits year, several different years, and maybe align them one day. There could be synergy in doing that down the road. For now, we've got plenty of work to do, but that's something we'll keep in mind for when the time is right. So, as we talked about last April, looking at the financial health of the cooperative is one of our 2 main goals. The financial health of the cooperative, while at the same time improving member service. And there's lots of ways we'll continue to look at both of those. But if we look at those in light of the mission statement, safe, reliable power at the lowest possible cost, that will guide our strategic decisions in light of the finances, in light of serving members more effectively, because there is no other business model that will serve them at cost as a cooperative. So that's something that excites us. And as we look at these budget results, I'm going to be excited to explain why as we move through the different categories. And it's going to tie back to things you've heard over the past 6 to 8 months largely. different efforts that we've made, lots of things that we've communicated in previous board meetings and president's reports, as well as to the members in current conversation. A lot of those things, especially the internal parts, are already starting to show up in the financials. So we're really excited about that. So if we don't have any questions about the financial statements, we'll go ahead and start with the first quarter budget update. Make sense? So we're not going to bury the headline. We're going to start right off. This is obviously a very favorable budget update. And while I'm excited about that, I still want to walk through the why and explain what's going on that drove that result and get some type of qualitative expectation, potential expect for the rest of the year. So we're 90 days through the budget year here. We stopped March 31st. Right off the top is the number you delegated to me, the total budget for 529 million change. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so while we're on the first line, so how does that budget compare to years past, like the operating and capital budget?
Good question. So these are things we've worked through. This will probably be a little bit conversational as we go. So this budget is a lot less, 529, than the previous two, which were 5 something and 580 respectively. It is a lower budget, and we'll talk about why. The capital in particular is less than half of previous capital budgets, which causes a lot of concern. We've talked about that. Hey, this is a 2024, 2025 move. It's a short-term part of the solution, the internal belt tightening. We can't stay at this level forever, but the direct answer to your question is capital is half of what it had been the previous few years. And this is at least $50 million less than the prior few budgets. So it's a lot less. And to be candid, we looked in 2024, even against the budget that we started kind of midway through, and tried to do everything we could to do better than that budget, and we did. But as we designed this 2025 budget, I was candid with you guys, especially in October and November, talking about we're going to squeeze capital for one more year, and we can't do it beyond there because a lot of the things that we're talking about, like right away, line maintenance, you have to continue doing those year after year. If you ever stop or slow down, not only will you have more work to do later, but the work you do later will cost more. So as far as safety and reliability at the lowest possible cost today and the future, we've got to continue doing that. So a lot of what we're doing here with this lower capital budget is getting caught up on work that's already been identified. We're doing a lot of maintenance for inspection and other work that had already been flagged, identified, scoped out. So we're doing a lot of that in 2024 and 2025. As we begin 2026 and start a normal schedule again, we will keep up with that maintenance and that tree trimming and things like that more in the future. So it's a lower budget than it has been in the past. It's intentional. The 65 million of capital is not sustainable for a cooperative our size, but for a 1 or 2 year period, we can do it and still maintain reliability. We could not do it post 26 and beyond for those reasons. So here's the total number you delegated to me, 529. We're gonna have a great favorable budget variance, but I'm gonna walk through the components in the major sections and we'll talk through those as we go. It would be tempting, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. So we're gonna talk about the operating budget and then we're gonna talk about the capital budget. Deep dives into both of those over the next 10, 15 minutes. But these are the two components for a utility. You guys know that it's very capital intensive. A lot of the material we buy on a dollar basis goes for goods that should last multiple decades. There are many business models in manufacturing and others that have a year, multiple years, several year lifestyles for a lot of their capital. For us, if you think about poles, transformers, substations, we better be getting 25, 30 plus years off a lot of that. So heavy capital intensive topics, and that's okay. That's normal for utility, but it's just a different animal than some of the other industries. We'll talk a little bit about everything we purchase is expensive. It is for everybody, no matter what kind of business you run. Our trucks for our crews, right now, they're going for well over hundreds of thousands of dollars. I can remember a time when it wasn't 5 or 6 years ago, you could get a bucket truck for $250,000 or less, and now you can't. And so everything's just, it's that way with all businesses, but it's a very capital intensive business. We understand that. And some of the things we're talking about as we get into the details will show what we're doing to manage that as good as we can. So we'll spend a few minutes talking about the operating side. Some people call it expense, some people call it operating. Those are synonyms. Either one's fine, whichever you're comfortable with. And capital will be a different discussion. I had some notes made for myself to make sure we cover some of these as we go through. So please ask questions as we go, and we'll do that. So we're going to talk about the operating or expense first. What I've got in the left-hand column is what we spent from January 1st to March 31st. The next column is what the budget was for that period of time. So you get apples to apples. And then the third column is just the variance of whatever that difference was. And I'll admit, it might be very tempting to look at this and just go straight to the quote proverbial bottom line and go, well, that's an $18.6 million favorable variance. And that's true. It's accurate, but it's not complete. And so I'll slow down a little bit here. We'll walk through some of the details of what's in some of these things and what's going on here, okay? The part that the cooperative can influence, and I don't want to say control, we can control parts of it, we can influence parts of it. The parts that we can influence are the operating maintenance expenses, for the most part. Now, there's a lot in there that we can't. How cold it is in the winter, how hot it is in the summer, that determines how long people's air conditioners run, heaters run, that sort of thing. So we can't control that, but we have a lot more influence over this section. So we'll take the section and we'll take some of the major hitters out of it. Of the top operating and maintenance expenses, we're about 1.9 million favorable for the first 90 days. Okay, that's good, but there's a lot of things going on in there, right? We're going to dive deeper into a few of these, at least 3 of these if you want to, okay? The one I'm going to pick on first is the only one in this category, even though it's a favorable budget update, it's favorable operating, it's favorable capital, everything is favorable. There's hundreds and hundreds of rows within our budget. One category that I'll point out to you, and it's going to be tempted to go, that's a bad thing, but it's not yet. It is over for the first 90 days, about 1.1 million is labor in the distribution expense for maintenance. But that's a really good thing, and here's why. This is seasonal. When we built this budget, we built it on the assumptions we had at the time. Since then, we have taken on a lot of work that used to be contracted out for various reasons we'll talk about that makes sense, but it makes financial sense for our members now that we're doing some of that work, particularly some of the line work. So for the first 90 days or so of the year, our crews have been doing work that contractors used to do, and that's heavily labor, a little bit of capital, but it's mostly labor, okay? That's the big hitter in there. So because of that, this 1.1 is going to look unfavorable. I'm going to spoil the punchline for you. When we get to capital, we're so far favorable in capital, you'll take that return on investment every day of the week. And if you could get it for your personal return, you do the same there. But this is also going to flip as we get to Q2 and Q3. This maintenance and labor will converge towards the budgeted level. And the capital, which is so far under budget for the first quarter, is going to come up and they're going to flip. And that's because we're doing a lot of maintenance right now. Q2 and Q3, hopefully the ground dries out. Hopefully we have more sunlight, things of that nature. We'll work on work plan projects, which have a lot more materials to them. So while we will also have labor, there'll be a lot more material and capital. So that will flip in Q2 and Q3. So that's a little bit of in-depth here. It's also a pretty good capital. I'll go ahead and touch on the administrative and general expense. Was the biggest variance of 2.5 million favorable. That's based on fewer consulting dollars and fewer legal support dollars for the cooperative. We obviously have our hands in a lot of things, and there's going to be outside expertise we need to engage at times, and that's okay. When we're using them, it's economies of scale. They have specific expertise that we don't need to have on staff. It's more economical to use those skills. So we're balancing that very well. But that's the biggest variance thus far. And if we really want to get into the weeds, and I'm kind of excited to do it, but I'm also reading the room going, okay, be careful, Scott, here. There's one other line item here that looks unfavorable, and it's only a small amount relative to the entire budget, relative to whatever it was on the previous slide here. What's that total budget? 529 million. To zoom in on 121,000 might not be that wise, but I think we should talk about it. Cost of power purchase is up 121,000 over the last year, or over the budget at that time. How do you feel about that? Well, if you put it in context, wait a minute. We've had 11.994, $12 million more revenue. It only costs you $121,000 to do it. You take that investment every day of the week. So the real question is, we've had a more explosive winter, if you will, yet the cost only went up a small fraction of a percent relative to how much load we purchased. You all know the backstory. We're just putting it all together right now. Last year, we looked at, hey, how are we buying power? What makes sense for us today may not be 10 years from now or 2 years ago, but for us today, we went to a load following contract because we did not want to be exposed at this time to the volatile real-time market. Volatile real-time hourly prices in ERCOT, especially in the summer and winter. I think we've learned a lesson. We know how painful that could be. So we didn't want to expose our members to that. So we did the deal we did, understanding the difference between price and cost. Look how that's worked out the first 90 days. We didn't do it to save money, but that's just a nice byproduct, right? What we didn't do is get exposed to LMPs over $1,000 or more per megawatt hour. So again, looking at things in context, it tells the story you already know from the wholesale power supply agreement that started January 1st, which is where this budget variance begins, January 1st. So we got 3 months of actuals. We've still got 4 years and 8 months left. It's a long time, but knowing that we don't have that exposure anymore, that Storm Uri that Texas was exposed to, we don't have that financial exposure going forward. We can't stop ERCOT from rolling blackouts. We can't stop tornadoes from hitting, evidence this week. We can't stop those things from happening, but the price we pay is capped. So that's a lot of detail going back to a lot of things we've already talked about. I just want to show the financial impact it's already having. It's beginning to show. So when you add up the operating part of the expense of a budget, it's 1.9 favorable overall, but that means some things are positive, some are negative. It's all coming back to that 529 and managing that and staying under it. So there's the biggest part. I wanted to start with there before we got into the more fun weeds. Yes, sir.
Scott, I want to tell you that my time on the board, this is the first CEO administration that has even suggested load shape versus our past. Load following versus our load shape. And I want to commend you on following through with getting the load following. It takes a lot of pressure off of us.
It really did. And the main thing I want us to take away from it is we didn't do it to save money. We don't know what tomorrow will hold.
No,
but
yeah.
knowing that we don't have to fear financially, however high ERCOT goes tomorrow, I'll hate it for our neighbors, but for our members, the fact that we don't have to fear that anymore is a good thing. And we didn't want to do all the internal belt tightening and everything else we're doing. And then something beyond our control, a wholesale power market, kind of blow us out of the water. So to not have that over our heads was a huge weight off my shoulders. I promise you that. So thank you. So let's go from operating and maintenance expense to, and I don't want to make anybody gloss over here with boredom, but for the non-accountants among us, the depreciation, tax, and interest. Now, what can we possibly glean out of there that's a story worth telling? Well, I'm glad you asked. So you're going to see it's more favorable, but this is kind of the boring stuff, right? Well, not necessarily. Let's take depreciation first. It's $842,000 more than budgeted. Should you all smack me on the hand? No, you should give me a high five. Why? Let's go back to last spring when we looked at construction work in progress and said, hey, remember the auditors are probably going to be here in the summer. And this is probably going to be one of the 3 things they highlighted. And sure enough, they highlighted 3 things. It's like we were reading their minds, if you will. Construction work in progress last spring was at 18 months. 18 months to close work in progress. And we really want that to be a shorter time window. It's not the amount of money, because you could be in a region filled with growth and have a huge number and you're closing the work orders in a reasonable amount. That's great. Likewise, you could be in a region with no growth, have few work orders. You still want to close them in a reasonable period of time. So we don't want to look at the amount of money in construction work in progress per se. We want to focus on the time. And as you're aware, I made a 3-year commitment last summer to get that to 6 months. As you're also aware, and we featured in the annual report, we're a year ahead of schedule. You kind of knew that would happen. But you can probably also guess our team's not going to take the full 3 years to get that done. They're already down to 10 months. by the end of this calendar year, certainly by the end of this fiscal year. I look forward to more good news there. But what that does is it capitalizes the parts, the material, the equipment. It capitalizes that faster, has some important and profound effects. I know, again, we're talking about accounting, but capitalizing that faster gets your balance sheet more accurate. Gets your income statement more accurate, because that's one of the expenses on the income statement is depreciation, right? Having that more accurate gives your lenders more confidence that we're doing the right things and they know it. I'll give you some quotes here at the end to prove it. But having that more accurate gives them more confidence. They're not taking a wild leap of faith. They can see we're closing things faster. So we'll continue to work towards getting those to 6 months to close. That's a good goal. That's where we want to be. That's really a aggressive goal, but we can get there by the end of the fiscal year, somewhere in that ballpark. So that's why this one's a little bit over budget. I'll hit the next four at one time. Interest expense. Seems a very boring accounting thing, right? Not really. There's 3 or 4 different stories going on here, and we're going to tell them all. So interest expense is more favorable than budget. Why? 3 things. First one, we'll pick the line of credit. This team, to their credit, for the past 10 months is 0 on the line of credit. We borrowed some, but we paid it back. This team is 0 on the line of credit for the past 10 months. Let's put that in context. That credit line's existed for 58, now 59 months. Every month, every other month for 5 years, it's been borrowed on. It's been built up. This team has done internal belt tightening. So many projects we've talked about over the past few months that are leading to that. Some of these are little ones. And in later President's Report highlights, going to show you some $10,000 or $15,000 ones. I don't want to call them little because they're big ideas and big effort, and somebody's doing a lot of work to make it happen. But when you add it up, this team hasn't received a dime from asset sales. There's not a dime of a rate action going on. That's internal belt tightening. And it's been very hard. The fact that we're meeting in places like this and doing all the other things we've talked about is the why behind that. So the line of credit has not climbed like it used to climb. There's fact number 1 for the interest savings. Fact number 2, go back and look at what we did last fall with some of the Winter Storm Uri debt. Those first three of the 8 loans, tranches as they call them, 2 of those were subject to variable interest rate risk. Could go up, could go down. If anybody knows where interest rates are going to go and when they're going to go, please tell me and nobody else. But unless you know that, that also exposed our members to volatility that could be good, could be bad, but I don't want to find out. So we locked in those rates, and what turned out to be saving hundreds of thousands every year, millions and millions over the life of those remaining loans, saving a lot of money there is showing up here. And then the third, and one of the rating agencies commented on that 2.5 weeks ago. I'll tell you about that later as well. The third thing that explains the favorable interest rate variance, budget variance, is when we built the 2025 budget. Again, this is last fall, we're compiling all of this. When we built this budget, there was a $45 million loan in there needed to get through it. We've been sitting on that every month. We are not going to take that $45 million loan. Not going to apply for it, not going to take it. In fact, it has come to our attention in recent months that there was a $343 million loan facility already in place. It had not been borrowed on, but it was in place. We've actually took action to close that loan as well. We don't need it. This team has proven, the 300 employees who are Tri-County Electric have proven that we can live on what we make. We have proven that we can be good stewards of members' funds. We have demonstrated it to you, members, lenders, regulators. We have demonstrated that, so we don't need those loans. So those are the 3 areas that have led to a favorable interest expense versus the budget. So if you add all those things together and many smaller categories like them, you'll come up with about 15 million almost of favorable budget variance. But we're not done. When we first turned this page, we were all tempted to look at the bottom and go, it's 18.6, almost 19. Well, what's the difference? Look over here and you find this big capital credit or patronage dividend. You go, okay, well, there it is. Well, what is that? So remember everything we talked about on the income statement, revenue and expenses don't equal money. This $4 million here, we received communication, information, data, notice of a $3.9 million capital credit. What we did not receive was a wire transfer, a check, or a bucket of money or an envelope. We didn't get any real money. We just got somebody's word, hey, we're retiring some capital credits, which means we have to recognize it as revenue, but it was not cash, okay? Because it is recognized as revenue in that period appropriately for GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, processes, and things of that nature, it does show up here as a favorable variance. One day, that organization, it was one of our lenders, they may decide to retire that allocation and send us between 0 and 100% of this real cash. And when they do, we'll put it on the balance sheet, cleaned up. But until then, it's just a nice letter, we'll kind of frame it. Nothing to it, right? So that's what's going on here with the operating, or some people call it the expense side of the budget. It is favorable, but each section tells you some of the projects we spent hours and hours talking about, months and months working on. So I don't want to zoom past those too quickly without making sure we answer any questions on that. Any questions about the operating side of the budget so far? If not, we'll move into capital. Now, capital, spend just a minute here. Unlike the operating, I want to show this one net from the whole year. So the first column is what we spent for the first 90 days, the $11.1 million. That has been spent, you can point to. I've got the total calendar year budget over here. So I want you to see the whole thing. As you guys know, utilities are so seasonal with the winter and summer in particular. I don't care if you're in power or gas, it's so seasonal. I want to keep the entire perspective, okay? If you look at the variance, well, yeah, you expect a big variance because you're only 25% through the year. You should have a big variance, Scott, right? Of course. It might be tempting to say, hey, look at this first quarter number, multiply it by 4 quarters, you get 44 million. And say, well, that's a $21 million variance. Not so fast. There will not be a $21 million variance. We will hit 65 million. And I'm telling you, 365 days in advance, or whatever it is now, 270 days in advance, we will hit 65. And so let's talk about how, and you're going to remember conversations we previously had. It's 3 things I want to bring to light here. One, we know our why, so it makes sense. So how? Each department has a budget, as you're aware now. That's something new started this year. Each department has a budget. Each department is accountable to their budget, just like I'm accountable to you for the 529. They're accountable to me for their portion of that. They have access to software now. They can go in any day of the year, any day of the month, and see where they are year to date, month to date, quarter to date, any way you want to draw it up. And they are checking on their own budget because they're accountable for it. Thirdly, they're meeting with the accounting team after the month, looking at their year to date, looking at their forecast, and looking at the projects, what else is coming in, what do you know now that you didn't know when the year began? What are the adds and the subtractions? What do you have to do to get to your number and make sure you stay within it, so on and so forth. So there's internal accountability, there's peer accountability, and there's me accountability. There's 3 levels. We can manage this now where it has not been in the past. We have proven we are managing it now. And that's a big number. And 300 people are contributing towards it. It's a lot of work. It is more work than the alternative. But we will hit that number because we know how much is counting on it. And we know what's at stake. We also know that in the coming years, that number will climb by dozens of millions each of the next few years. So we will again model that we can be good stewards. We will continue being good stewards of the members' funds. I want to pause here and describe this budget construction process. Last fall, Dustin and I were in a conference room about the size of this, with our laptops, a bunch of paper, a dry erase board, and we were really stressed. And I told you guys about this as we were working through it. I waited a day or so, but I told you about it. We were asking ourselves a really tough question. Like, hey, if you're the lenders, These are the metrics we gotta make. Is it possible? Last summer, we were asking, can it be done? Not how, can it be done? And after days of beating our brains at submission, we found, okay, mathematically, it can be done. And then it was all momentum rolling downhill. We called each vice president in one by one and said, okay, if you have to do this, how can you do it? And we began having collaborative conversations. It actually unified us more than anything else could have. Honestly, if you'd given us a big bucket of cash, it wouldn't have done as much good as not having it and trying to solve how are we going to do it. So with each budget, each department, you know, one of the age-old budget methods in most organizations is take last year's number and add inflation to it, and we burned the ships. We started from the ground up. We challenged every assumption. We challenged it against the mission statement that I preach every day. It's ingrained in our hearts. Safe, reliable, lowest possible cost. Every project, every action was weighed against that. And we said no and not now to a lot of good things that wouldn't be bad to do. But we said no and not now to a lot of things. And that culture is permeating throughout the organization. As they came in and we designed their department budgets together, there was a little bit of, okay, we can do this. And so I'll tell you a few updates. Well, before I do though, let me get back to this. The result is the budget I presented to you in November for 529, significantly lower than previous budgets. This team is doing more with less. This team is doing more for less. The results speak for themselves. I don't have to say it, but I'm going to say it. Capital budget's in a good place. The operating budget's in a good place. The budget's in a good place. The financial statements are getting in good places. Tremendous progress. More progress than I thought would be possible in 1 year. For the annual report we just put out to say this team ended the year with less debt than we began. And we honored all the promises that we made, whether we think they were good deals or not. Tri-County's word was given and we honored those promises. Aid and Construction is a good example. We talked a lot about that. We want to honor the promises that were made. And then going forward, making sure every member pays their own way versus socialization. There's huge examples like that. And we still ended the year with less debt than we began. We haven't hit the line of credit. We're net zero for 10 months. We borrowed a small amount earlier this year and we paid it off. And we're actually going to make another payment in April. So we'll actually be negative this calendar year on the line of credit. This team has done a lot to shift the thinking to prove we are good stewards of our members' funds. Don't take my word for it. Don't look at the numbers and the facts themselves. Listen to two recent testimonials. So we had one of our lenders come in the week before last, one of our two primary lenders, one of our two lenders, period. And it's a new rep. And he had compared notes with the previous rep that did all the work with us. They're a cooperative, so Tri-County's had a good relationship with them for many years. And the previous rep gave him a bullet point list of all the things that Dustin and I sat down with him last May and said, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to get there. And we showed him the game plan in excruciating detail. We spent an afternoon and we gave him play by play. You know where we went, the power supply agreement, the internal belt tightening, the assets, everything. We outlined it for him last May. We sat down with a new rep, not knowing that he had that background. We didn't know. We just knew, hey, we got to make sure we make this right. We got to make sure they're comfortable with Tri-County going forward. We told them everything that they were about to see in that annual report, major step for major step for major step. He took notes. When he was done, he smiled, put his paper down like, oh no, what's he about to do? Because y'all just told me the same thing you told the former person's name last May, with one exception. Today, you're using past tense verbs. Last May, it was promises and it was plans, and we appreciate it, but you just showed us. That was encouraging because we still have ongoing business. We want their confidence. We want them to believe and see what we're doing. We've been very transparent. We spend a little more time there than you normally would with your lender, but they've earned the right to know we're on good ground going forward and that we're solid. And so that was encouraging to know that he gave us some qualitative feedback to expect good things in the future with future renewals and things of that nature. Very positive from that perspective. A different industry partner, a rating agency that rates our debt, met with the team 3 weeks ago. Remember the winter storm Uri debt, how we took the first 3 loans, refinanced it, saved a bunch of money, saving millions over the term, not exposing our members to variable interest rate risk anymore. They called that word, they called that move genius. That was their term, not ours, but we appreciate the intent of noticing that we're trying to do everything we can to protect our members, whether it's volatile wholesale real-time prices in ERCOT, volatile inflation, volatile interest rate risk, things we don't have to expose our members to. Then noticing we're being consistent with that. We're not being conservative over here, fiscal discipline over here, and living crazy over here. We're doing it all the way around the board, all bases. So we appreciate that feedback. They didn't have to say those things, quite frankly. They had nothing to gain by saying that, to be blunt with you. So here's your Q1 budget overview. But not one thing I've told you has been new here. We've talked about the different pieces of this for the past 10 months. Nothing new happened here. We're just using past tense verbs. So any questions about the budget or the financial impacts that's having before you go on to any other topics? I'd love to pause and let you guys interact here. I didn't mean to take the whole stage.
Got the department heads shared that down the line, and that's a good feeling to know.
Yeah. What was exciting, and we'll do a better job of in the future, telling that story even more. We've had our heads on a swivel for a few months. There's no secret for sure. But to see the encouragement of people realizing the things they're doing are making a difference.
That's right.
When each department, when each team is working on their piece, and sometimes they're $1 million pieces, and sometimes they're $1,000 pieces, whatever it is, to see that coming together and everybody feeling included and collaborative, you can see it in their eyes, and that's encouraging. It's encouraging to know they get their why. We're trying to make a common goal. It's not easy, but that togetherness, you can't get that if everything's perfect. And so to see that and to be working through that with the team, even as before you guys came in, people were coming in, looking at offices, trying to get things ready for moves, just how adaptable and flexible they're demonstrating these values. It's just really encouraging. So kudos to the team. They've done a lot to get us here. If you guys think this is good, watch what happens at the end of this fiscal year. I'm really excited about that. So if you don't have any questions for me about the budget or the impacts of that or anything related to it, be happy to move on to the next item if you'd like.
We're ready. So president's report.
So we'll just kind of go through some of the highlights. I'm not going to go over everything. Some of these were, trade confidential, things of that nature, but I'll go through some of the highlights. And I really probably should have done this first because you saw some of the results in the financials just now. But one of the first things I shared was just a graph of the line of credit showing how this team is actually net zero. And I wish I could go ahead and update for April that just ended, but being net zero for the last 10 months is a testament to these things are starting to work because we're able to exist within our means. We're able to exist within the revenues we're taking in. So that has led to other short-term opportunities like investing funds. So our power bill is due, we get the power bill in the first of the month. We bill members in cycles on business days throughout the month. There's always a lag there. And that's what lines of credit are typically used for in utilities, of paying that power bill and then replenishing it over the next 6 weeks or so as the cash comes in. We've been able to make short-term investments of a week to 10 days on partial power bill amounts and earn small amounts of interest. Nothing earth-shattering, but hey, 10,000 here, 10,000 there over the course of the year, that's going to add up to a 6-figure amount. So there's all these different things that different people are working on. And so now I'm thinking of the team that's managing the cash on a daily basis. Their job would be so much easier if I said, nah, just let it ride, whatever it is, just hit the credit line. But they're looking ahead at what cash are we going to take in for the next 3 or 5 days, what bills are coming due. They're doing a whole lot of math in Excel that, quite frankly, their counterparts in other organizations might not have to do. And there will come a time when we don't have to do that. But right now, working through it, it's making tens of thousands of dollars a month difference. So we're happy to be able to share that with you. At the end of the first page, I gave an MDSC update, and that should be near and dear to our heart. We should all have a tattoo. Modified debt service coverage. That's the metric our lenders require. 1.3 1.35 is kind of the minimum what we're looking at. It really could go very north of there. We could clear the bar by a lot for the fiscal year that just ended. It's required on the fiscal year and a calendar year. We could exceed that bar by a lot, depending on a couple of things that the auditors look at and see what they place in which buckets. It's a matter of how much we clear by, not, as Dustin and I were stressed for a few days, can we clear it? It's by how much did we just clear it? So I think that's another, you don't have to believe us, look at the facts type of thing. So we'll be well above the minimum threshold there. Hopefully we'll have a good start this year as well. We've talked a lot about the fiscal year that ended March 31st, and tonight we've talked a lot about the budget year. That's the first 3 months of the calendar year. I realize we're kind of going back and forth a little bit, but some of these things obviously overlap, but to the extent that they impact each other, they're mutually inclusive. As of March 31st, we've reduced debt from December 31st by $4.9 million. You know, while we're doing everything else. That may not seem like a lot to an organization with a $529 million budget, but we're being faithful with the pennies, showing you that those are adding up and they're going in the right direction. Secondly, I'll point out with that, that's coming out of the winter months when we get those astronomical power bills and we have to pay that on day one and the revenue doesn't come in for weeks or a month and a few days or whatever. With that incredible lag, if that had occurred in the spring or the fall, you know, that'd be pretty cool too. But that was done in the winter is really cool. So that's encouragement that things are headed in a really good direction financially. On the middle of the third page, I'm going to point to two things with cellular device audits and savings from elimination of unused licenses. Now, neither one of those sound like a great headline. They've made great social media clickbait. They're $10,000 and $15,000 respectively. It's a different department, a group of folks working really hard, faithfully managing what's been entrusted to them, giving a cooperative back, saying, no, this is in my budget, but we don't need all this much. We only need, and then coming back to the table and turning it in. In many organizations, the culture can be, unfortunate at times, where this is my budget, where can I use it? Where can I? Not how much could I? So that's proof of a lot of people are getting it. We're not perfect, I'm not saying that, but a lot of people are contributing to this. We did send out the fiscal year 2025 annual report, and we're excited when the financials get audited later this summer, usually August, September timeframe, for your auditor to share that with you directly. But we got a lot of encouraging feedback from industry participants. When you think about people who know cooperatives, people who make their living dealing with cooperatives, suppliers, lenders, industry associations, attorneys, consultants, et cetera. When you think about those people who make a living doing this, to get that kind of feedback from them, that was also encouraging for the team as well. It's just another affirmation of there's a lot of good financial things going on, a lot of good momentum there. So you also noticed in your Form 7 of the CFC Form 7 or the RUS Form 7, the meter count now is over 141,000. From the time I wrote this, it's almost 142. So we still are experiencing a lot of growth in the area. That's something we talked a lot about last summer as we ended the subsidies. Like, you know, what will that do to growth? We're still getting a lot of growth. And so, you know, we're excited about that because we know going forward that's sustainable. It's not costing the cooperative. It's not being subsidized. And so that's encouraging from a variety of perspectives, particularly as it relates to the Winter Storm Uri debt, giving us a bigger base to make sure that stays stable going forward. So pleased with that. Very excited. You may have seen some news from one of our suppliers, our material supplier. I will not give them a free advertisement here, but that transition is complete. Our former material supplier was replaced. A project, I don't know in hindsight if it was wise to take on when we did, but we did. Most of the people that are involved in that are still here. And okay, we learned a lot about how much can you drink from at one time, but to save about $6 million a year, it's worth it. So that's the bottom of page 3. This is what I'm going to point out on that. All the work that was done on that and many other things, you haven't seen a dime of the savings coming yet. They're going to start later this spring and this summer when you hit that 1 year mark. We're buying materials from them. They're a national supplier. They have as much economies of scale as you could really have. But that's something we want to keep an eye on, is when things like that start to pay off. We spent the first year plowing a lot of ground, doing a lot of planting. Seeds like that are starting to show up. And as we work through the existing material and get to those savings, there's another 6 million. When you look at 529, you go, well, 6 is not going to move the needle. No, but when you add up all the other things of the previous 10 months, it is starting to get cumulative. And so that's encouraging. Changing topics, we did finalize a contract with Survey and Ballot Systems, and they've offered a savings and some enhanced security. So for the upcoming director elections, we're going to cross 2 different topics here. Survey and Ballot Systems will be mailing out the paper ballots. They have a robust process. They do this for lots of cooperatives, and not just in our industry. It's what they do. Well, there's going to be some material savings from that versus sending them out in the magazine. Members will still receive their email, and that's still encrypted and it's still safe, if not more safe. But just the savings there is something we couldn't pass on as far as the ability to have an election at a lower possible cost. Didn't want to bypass that. Again, it's not as much money as other things, but you add all these things together and they start to add up. So excited about that. We'll get to a couple of things here just as far as serving members more effectively. As you're aware, in the president's report, I organize things in financial health and improve member service, serving them more effectively. So we'll focus on some of the things over here, and you can argue these are in both. That's okay. You saw first thing under serving members more effectively that call hold times are still headed down in a really favorable direction. That's really good, in particular when you think we're coming out of the winter with high bills. To have that kind of momentum there is going, okay, this is really working. You can see on the reliability, both Sadie and Katie both having progress. Now, again, I don't want to be insensitive with the storms that have happened this week. We know right now we've got over 300 members still out, and a lot of progress we believe will be made today before bedtime. But some of those meters, are going to be difficult to get to, the routine feet of water. But to have this kind of improvement for Sadie and Katie, I don't know what more you could expect with that financial update, with that member service hold time, with that reliability. I don't think it's reasonable to expect sustained performance at this level, but we will find a way. After last month's meeting, we talked about energy efficiency and using the unclaimed state funds that they allow us to use for 3 specific categories. We outlined that education and the energy efficiency concepts. And this is not coming from members' funds. This is from the state allowing us to use that money only for these specific purposes. Within 2 weeks of announcing the energy efficiency rebate program, we had over 250 applications. And since I gave you this president's report, that's climbed even more. So we're excited about that. We're excited to see, can our team maximize that $250,000? So we want to get back to the members as soon as we can. So with this and the other bucket from the state, if you will, our goal is to maximize all of it. We don't want to save it for future years. We want to give it to members now. And so this is one of the ways we can do it. We'll continue to communicate in every possible way about this program, and hope members will also do the same, because it's an opportunity for them to have a rebate just for going through the process and making sure that some documentation is submitted and everything passes. So we're excited about that. But our goal is to max out that 250 this calendar year. I'm betting on the team, but let's see how it goes. A few more things I'll emphasize from later. We did receive 185 applications this year. So again, going back to the Texas state funds coming from the Asheets for the scholarship program. So those are the $5,000 scholarships for 50 students. We received 185 applications, so we're pleased that will be fully funded and processed here in the near future. We also want to recognize the Parker County Retired Educators Association for being the independent judges, if you will. Everything was masked or blind to them, and they evaluated the applications and made those decisions. So pleased that they were partnering with us and do that, offer that service to the community. Pleased to be able to offer that state money back to our members. And excited for those 50 high school seniors to get the $5,000 scholarship. That's a win-win-win, and just very encouraged by that. While we're talking about all the other financial things, to find different ways to serve members with reliability, decreased hold times, ways to give back to the community like that. again, it's kind of a triangle of perfection, so I want to be very careful how we talk about it, but we're very thankful to be able to do that. Something else, our MSRs have turned into a fun internal challenge. And when you have work to do and you can make it a challenge, it's very exciting. As members have requested, we have given the option to opt out of the paper magazine. And last week, close to 500 members opted out. The week before that, another 500 members opted out. There are over 3,000 members that have chosen to opt out so far, and they're about to approach the paperless billing members, which is over 30,000, and we expect a really high take rate on that too. So it wouldn't surprise me to have about 30,000 who have opted out of the paper magazines in the near future. And the importance of that, as you guys know, is we spend over $1 million a year to produce and to send that magazine out, even though we don't produce it. And we are giving the same information 6 weeks in advance for free on our website and directly to our members' email. So happy for those who want to make that decision. Again, that's in response to members asking, is there a way to help save money? Well, that is one of the options. So pleased that a lot of members are thinking about that. It's not for everybody. It's one of those options, but as more and more momentum continues, there is something we'll continue to take a look at over the coming year or two for sure. And then to follow up on another thing from last month, we talked about increasing options for members, particularly for builders in many cases that want to do their own trenching services. Anybody could do it if they got access to resources and choose to do that type of project, if they'll honor the specs and everything is up to speed. But in a lot of cases, builders have economies of scale, resources, equipment, things of that nature. It just made a lot of sense for them, for us and for them to do that. They've been asking for years. We found a way to say yes. Again, we probably took on too much in one period of time, but we've crossed that. And so I've included probably about 5 or 6 quotes from large builders in this area, just thanking us for making that option available. They haven't all started doing it yet. Some are looking towards that, but to know that they've got that option, members don't have to do it. Any member has the option should they choose to do, but it's kind of rewarding to see them recognize that we are listening to them and doing what we can to improve service wherever we can, as long as it's not subsidized. So maybe 2 more things, if you'll let me, in closing. We are working, and we've been working for a while internally on updating our membership application. There's some things we recognize we can do a little bit more efficiently that will help members, particularly in this day and age in 2025. Most are paperless and things of that nature, but there's some things we want to set up in advance for them to give them a little bit more flexibility. You'll be seeing more information coming out as we get that finalized. We're not quite there yet. We're thinking late May, but this will be more of a streamlined process. Just one more thing to make it a little bit easier to deal with your local electric provider. And we're very excited about that. A lot of the behind the scenes work there is based on comments made to the MSRs over the years. So just kind of imagine the catalog of knowledge dumped into, well, how will that look? What will that process look like? So it's one of those one-time upfront relationship setters, but hopefully to make as good an impression as we can when a new member comes to our area or engages with us for the first time. So we're excited about that. And then the last thing from this section for now, we've also been working behind the scenes for a few months on a member and employee discount program. This isn't ready to be rolled out quite yet. We need to do a little bit more belt tightening on it and a little bit more documentation, but this is something that won't cost the membership anything for local vendors that want to offer a special rebate or benefit or discount just for being a member of Tri-County Electric. We have several criteria. One, it'd be worthwhile. 2, it'd be easy. We don't want, triplicate forms of papers and 10 witnesses. We want it to kind of be easy to work with, but we also want it to be meaningful. And so we're going to get ready to start rolling those out. And we envision several different types of communication. 1, being on our website, having a web page there. And 2, just including some things in current conversations to let people know that if other businesses want to join in and offer something of meaningful value, we'd be happy to offer that opportunity if the situation is appropriate there. So a lot of things there in this section for improving member service. We talked a lot about finances today. I didn't want to skip over that without saying, and all parts of the house are working, and I want to show something from different parts of the house at the same time. So unless there's any questions about that, that concludes that part of the agenda. Any questions, comments?
Great job. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the update.
They've done a lot of work. They've done a lot of work. Thank you. So.
So this concludes our open session, and thank you all and have a nice evening.
Thank you.